Questions without notice. The member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. Last night on the 7:30 report, the former Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, said a deal on to trade guns for votes by the Minister for Immigration was not authorised. Is that accurate? Was the minister acting without the authority of the then Prime Minister, the member for Warringah?
The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question. And obviously, the government's been very clear in relation to these matters. We have no guns that have been imported as proposed by Senator Leyonhjelm. We have, as the Minister for Justice has spoken about in recent days, we put a ban in place which didn't allow those guns to come in, and the arrangement was at the time that there would be a COAG process, as has been the case back to the Howard days when the arrangement was put together, and the arrangement was that the premiers and the chief ministers would deal with that particular consideration on the advice of the police ministers and the police commissioners, and that is as has happened today. So to go to the substantive issue, and I'll come back to the honourable member's question in a second, the issue is that this government has been very consistent and strong when it comes to gun laws. We have implemented national security legislation which has given our agencies, both policing and intelligence agencies, the best possible chances of dealing with crime. Now, Labor has opposed us at every turn. Labor has opposed us in relation. To legislation, including mandatory sentencing.
The member for Sydney is warned. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, on direct relevance, the question is very specific. The minister said he would come
Manager
back
of
to the issue
Opposition
and ask him
Business
to do so.
will resume his seat. The minister is in order.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And to go to the honourable member's question, there were discussions between myself and Minister Keenan in relation to what approach there should be. Labor had proposed some amendments to a national security piece of legislation whereby they proposed to weaken that legislation, and we wanted Senator Leyonhjelm, Senator Day and the other independent senators to support our national security legislation. It was in relation to the collection of biometrics at airports, and we wanted that bill through the parliament. And there was a discussion, as Senator Leyonhjelm mentioned this morning. I had a meeting with him and Senator Day in Senator Day's office. I've made checks this morning. I'm advised that there is no correspondence between my office and the office of the then Prime Minister. But there's no question that at an advisor's level there would have been discussions. There would have been discussions around this issue to suggest that these arrangements were entered into, that somehow Senator Keenan and I entered into these arrangements without there being discussion between officers is not Minister Keenan. I'm sorry, and that is. There no doubt would have been discussions, but as I say, there's no correspondence. I'm advised from my office to the then PMO to go directly to the member's question.
The member for Robertson.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the government's National Economic Plan? How will re-establishing the Australian Building and Construction Commission boost economic growth, deliver more jobs and improve productivity in the workplace?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, and I thank the honourable member for a question. Mr Speaker, we took our National Economic Plan to the election, and we won the election. We won the election. We took a carefully considered set of measures which we know will deliver the economic growth and the opportunities our children and grandchildren deserve. The Labor Party, on the other hand, went to the election with an anti-business, higher tax, higher debt, anti-growth agenda, which would inevitably restrict the opportunities, shrink the horizons of our children and our grandchildren, the ones for whom we should care the most. Now, Mr Speaker, we promised middle-income tax cuts, and we have delivered. More than 500,000 middle-class Australians will be paying 32.5% tax instead of going up into the higher 37% tax brackets. Now, we are pursuing thousands of export opportunities for Australian businesses. We're continuing to open up new opportunities for our exports. We've seen just in the last week the signing of the new expanded Singapore-Australia Free Trade Agreement, building on the deals with China, Korea and Japan. And we know that this is going to be, in Singapore, a big win for our services sector, education, engineering, accounting, legal services. This is the financial hub of Southeast Asia, and we now have the access to it that Australian businesses need. And, Mr Speaker, we are standing up to union thuggery. Mr Speaker, the construction sector employs 1 million Australians. It is vital to our economic prospects. Its efficiency, its lawfulness, determines the cost of everything we build, whether it is a road, whether it's a school, whether it's a dam, whether it is a hospital, whether it is an apartment building which a young couple may want to buy their first home in. All of that is determined by whether the rule of law prevails, and we know it does not. And we know why it does not. The thuggery we see is having a massive cost. Consider, just today, reports of the CFMEU's unlawful action and adding hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost to the projects in Queensland, including the Sunshine Coast University Hospital project, costing Lendlease up to $100,000 a day. Who pays for that? The taxpayer. Who suffers reduced services? Citizens. We're standing up for the rule of law as part of our national economic plan to drive jobs and growth, and we call on those opposite to join us in securing our future.
The member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Justice. Last night on 7:30, the former Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, said a deal to trade guns for votes by the Minister for Justice was not authorised. Is that accurate? Was the minister acting without the authority of the then Prime Minister, the member for Warringah?
The Minister for Justice.
I have the great advantage, when I'm questioned by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition about gun regulation in Australia, of actually knowing something about the subject matter. And that does give me a great advantage in this matter.
Members on both sides.
Now, the premise of her question,
Members on both sides will cease interjecting.
is completely and utterly false. The idea that this government in any way, shape or form did what she's alleging, somehow traded on gun laws, is completely and utterly false. Now, I've already set out in the House on Tuesday exactly what has happened here. It is a very simple process that resulted in a conversation between the then government and Senator Leyonhjelm. We put a sunset clause on a regulation that restricted the import ban of lever-action shotguns with a capacity of over 5, and we did that at his request as part of a conversation that we were having with him. I had hoped that we would have concluded the negotiations with the states that actually have responsibility for classifying guns in Australia during that 12-month period. There was no understanding with anybody, including Senator Leyonhjelm, that the government would do anything other than extend that ban if that agreement hadn't been put in place. Indeed, I can actually read you the specific words from the regulation, which we passed through the Senate on the 7th of August 2015. And the regulation said a temporary prohibition on the importation of those firearms is being put in place. A temporary prohibition on the importation of those firearms has been put in place. This is an interim measure until the review and the update of the National Firearms Agreement are completed. And we used very similar language when we renewed that regulation when that sunset clause came into effect 12 months later.
Has the minister concluded his answer? Okay, minister will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, I don't see how the minister can be directly relevant without referring to the former Prime Minister.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. Members on my right will cease interjecting. I'll understand that I'll always hear the Leader of the House and the Manager of Opposition Business. I don't extend that more widely than that. I say to the Manager of Opposition Business that he can't insist that a minister use certain words. He's been directly relevant to the question. He might not like the answer, but he can't have the question asked and demand a certain answer. The minister is entirely in order.
Now, because the opposition knows nothing about gun regulation, I'll give them a very quick guide. The states and territories classify guns in Australia according to their lethality. We do that based on the advice that we get for our law enforcement agencies. The Commonwealth controls the importation of guns. Now, of course, on all matters in relation to this,
The member for Cowan.
on all matters in relation to the conversations that we had with Senator Lamehill, I've been very upfront about what happened. He obviously has a different view about it, but the government's position has been entirely consistent. On the question about my interaction with the Prime Minister's office in relation to this, we interacted in the usual way, as we would with the Prime Minister's office, of keeping them appraised about what was going on.
The member for Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. Will the Deputy Prime Minister update the House on the Coalition Government's $2.5 billion water infrastructure commitment? Are there any threats to the timeliness of the construction and the cost of these significant nation-building projects?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. Might I say, yes, there are impediments that are put forward, especially by militant groups such as the CFMEU. And we have such a vision for Central Queensland in such things as the Gayndah Regional Irrigation Development and the money and the wealth that it will bring into that area. Also in the member for Flynn's area is Rookwood Weir, for which we've put $130 million on the table and also $2 million for the feasibility study to get this plan up and running to provide real jobs. Over 2,300 jobs, an extra $1 billion a year for the city of Rockhampton. But what we're up against, and the member would know quite clearly, is that as the Labor Party in Queensland heads towards elections, they're more interested in green preferences. Their vision for their state does not go beyond the Pine River. It's a vision for Brisbane. They're happy to talk to us about cross-river rail, but they don't want to talk about the people of Central Queensland. And it's an indictment on those Labor Party members from Central Queensland, state members who don't stand up for their area, don't stand up for the people, don't go into bat so that they can actually get this delivery. And it is something that's been picked up by all the papers, as they clearly understand. They clearly understand that the Labor Party is not a party of vision. They are a party that believes that they should be representing, rather than the people of Central Queensland, the CFMEU, like they represented the CFMEU when we saw the desalination plant down in Victoria, which was supposed to cost $2.9 billion and ended up costing $4 billion, and every day costs $1.8 million and doesn't produce a drop of water for the people of Victoria. That is the sort of organisational skills you get when the party is beholden to the CFMEU. That is the sort of organisational skills you get when, whilst building the desalination plant, it was reported that they had midweek parties with strippers and ice, where they had a shop steward who tried to import $147 million worth of cannabis and got a 5.5-year jail term. This is the sort of standover tactics, the sort of the corruption which is embellished within the CFMEU, and they haven't stopped. The CFMEU are back at work at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games Village. They're at work at the Sunshine Coast Hospital. They are the sort of people who stand in the way of us building the Rookwood Weir. They're the sort of people who will stand in the way for us delivering the sort of vision that the Coalition has, a vision for inland rail, the vision for dams, the vision for roads, the visions for Badgerys Creek. But what is our problem? Our problem is the CFMEU, the Greens and the Australian Labor Party. And sometimes you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between them. But they're there. They're there today. And we can see even here in the in the Sunshine Coast, it's costing up to $100,000 a day. $100,000 a day. But don't worry, the Labor Party will get it back next time they get a donation.
The member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is again to the Minister for Justice, and it refers to his previous statement that there was no deal with Senator Leyonhjelm. Can the minister explain why the email from his office refers to a sunset clause of 12 months and, I quote, in return for Senator Leyonhjelm's
Member for Corangamite, trying to listen to the question. The Minister for Justice has the call. Members on my left, the Minister for Justice has the call.
Well, yet again, that premise of the question is completely wrong. I've said already in the House on Tuesday that we put a sunset clause on that regulation at the request of Senator Leyonhjelm as a result of a conversation that we were having with him, that the government was having with him. I've already explained that. I've already explained that particular.
Members on my left.
I've already explained that particular matter. Now, I'd like to remind the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, when she was a minister in the Gillard and Rudd governments, lever-action shotguns were categorised in Category A, the lowest possible licensing arrangement that we can have, the same category that we put air rifles in. And the thing is about Category A licences is that you could have multiple weapons. In fact, if you wanted to, you could have had 100 lever-action shotguns, regardless of their capacity, regardless of their calibre. Now, we decided that that was an inappropriate classification for that particular gun, and we started a conversation with the states and territories about what that appropriate classification would be. We have been negotiating with them ever since. Now, I would have liked that negotiation to be completed within the 12 months before that sunset clause was exercised, but it wasn't, so we did exactly what we said we would do, and we continued the restriction of the import of lever-action shotguns with a magazine capacity of over 5 until those negotiations were concluded. The government's position has been the same in 2014, 2015, up till today.
The member for Sydney.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table a copy of this email that shows that the sunset clause
You've sought leave. Is leave granted? Leave is not granted. Leave is not granted.
No.
It's the independence question. The member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, earlier today, representatives from the 100% Australian-owned consortium, BBHO, attended Parliament House, and they are here in the gallery. Do you agree, as a matter of principle and for the national interest, that if there is a credible, commercially competitive 100% Australian bid for the iconic Australian asset, such as S. Kidman & Co Cattle Empire, that the local bid should take precedence over any other bids involving overseas interests?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Look, I thank the honourable member for her question, and I applaud her patriotism. We always welcome Australians investing in Australian agriculture, but as you know, the decisions to make investments are taken by individual commercial enterprises. There is a level of federal regulation which is of course, as you understand, the foreign takeovers legislation administered by the Treasurer, and so I'll ask him to further respond to your question.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and I thank the member for her question. As she would know, as Treasurer, I rejected the proposal for foreign ownership of Kidman & Co. I rejected it. I rejected it, Mr Speaker. Those opposite were going to approve it, Mr Speaker, and we rejected it. And that has provided the opportunity for bidders to come forward to purchase that property. Now, it is Kidman & Co that is selling that property not the government, no one else. They are in charge of the process for deciding which bids that they will accept or not accept, and they will obviously be subject to the legislation governing foreign investment in Australia. So I'm pleased about the fact that, having rejected the foreign ownership proposal for Kidman, what was going to be approved by those opposite had they won the election, that now there are other bids coming forward. And when those bids come forward, we will consider those to the extent that they require the approval of the government in relation to any foreign ownership component of those. But given we're on the topic of foreign investment, Mr Speaker, I am very pleased that in New South Wales there has been the announcement today that, following our decision to reject the foreign ownership proposal for Ausgrid, that there has been a fully Australian-owned proposal that has come forward, and to achieve the sale of Ausgrid in New South Wales, that it remains under Australian ownership, and that has been facilitated through the operations of the decisions here. But particularly I wish to commend the New South Wales Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian and the New South Wales Premier Mike Baird for what they have done to ensure that these assets can be recycled and invested back into important infrastructure in New South Wales. And both of these decisions, whether it has been on Ausgrid or whether it has been on Kidman, show that the government is doing its job when it comes to policing foreign investment in this country, and that is bringing forward Australian Australian investment
the Treasurer
in these important
will
assets.
resume his seat. Has the Treasurer concluded his answer? Has the Treasurer? The Treasurer has concluded his answer. The member for Wright.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How important is the safe and productive construction industry to the national economy, and will the Treasurer outline to the House how the Australian Building and Construction Commission can better protect law-abiding and honest people on Australian building and construction sites?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Wright for his question and his keen interest in ensuring that the rule of law returns to building and construction sites right across Queensland, right across the country. And we know that lawlessness on building and construction sites around the country that could be prevented by the restoration of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. This lawlessness is choking productivity in that sector, increasing the cost of projects by some 30%, which threatens investment in this country, which means it's more expensive to build hospitals and schools and all of this public infrastructure, as well as important private infrastructure, which is frustrated by the lawlessness on these sites. And he knows that we've already mentioned this week that
the Treasurer will resume his seat. The member for Kennedy on a point of order?
No.
No, OK. The Treasurer. That's all right. That's your exercise for the day. It's fine. The Treasurer has the call. Treasurer has the call. You said you didn't have a point of order. The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So we've heard of the instances where the CFMEU have sought to shut down sites because they don't like the tiler or they don't like the security firm who have been blackballed by unions in favour of their mates, and they even will shut down a site because they're not going to fly a CFMEU flag from a crane in Adelaide, Mr Speaker. But what we also know about the CFMEU and the other unions and militant unions that are involved on these sites is that there is serious criminal activity that takes place. And it was last year Commissioner Ken Lay stated there was intelligence which indicates that people who are related to bikies or organised motorcycle gangs are selling drugs on building sites, Mr Speaker. And Operation Warrior in Queensland, the CMC's biggest ever covert operation in 2012, found that a drug ring mastermind, Daniel Kalaja, also used a friend of the BLF union to score a job on a $1.8 billion taxpayer-funded Gold Coast University hospital project, despite never holding a job, never holding a legitimate or honest job. The CMC has already linked drug kingpin Kalaja to 2 union officials who have been jailed for their part in one of Queensland's biggest drug rings. Wayne Josephs Carter, BLF organiser, was sentenced to 8 years in jail after he and his brother joined Kalaja in the trade of drugs, including methamphetamine, MDMA, ecstasy and fantasy, Mr Speaker. So what we know, those opposite like to say there's no link between our organised motorcycle gangs and militant unions on building construction sites, but the people of Australia know that they're carving up building at sites like drug kingpins carve up their distribution networks across our cities. And that's why the ABCC needs to be restored. Safety and health in workplaces means you can go to work without being sold drugs by people that unions let onto building sites.
It's just before I call the Leader of the Opposition, the member for Denison, the independent question's been asked. No, the member for Denison will resume his seat. No, the rules for question time are very clear. It's the Leader of the Opposition's call. The member for Denison can ask his question the next time the independents have a question on the next sitting day. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister. According to former Prime Minister Abbott, the Minister for Immigration and the Minister for Justice made a deal to trade guns for votes without the authority of the then Prime Minister. What steps has the Prime Minister taken to determine whether what the former Prime Minister said was true, or whether the Minister for Immigration or the Minister for Justice are telling the truth instead, that the Prime Minister's office was in fact advised?
The member for Wakefield will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The honourable member speaks about guns. He speaks about safety. The truth that is, as we know, that the vast majority of gun crimes are committed with illegal weapons, unlawfully imported, smuggled indeed, into Australia. And often by bikies, as the Treasurer observes, often by bikies. That is the fact. That is the fact.
The member
we
for
have
Bendigo
a very
will
high
leave under
standard
94A.
of firearm regulation in Australia, the envy of the world. But what we have is a very significant black market trade in illegal weapons, smuggled into Australia. And our law enforcement agencies do everything they can to stamp it out. And our job as parliamentarians is to give them the tools to do that job. And that's why we have sought to persuade the opposition to support
members for Bruce and Solomon.
A minimum mandatory sentence of 5 years for gun smuggling, for illegal trafficking in guns, and to double the maximum penalties from 10 to 20 years. And we get, in response, the claim that the opposition does not, as a matter of principle.
The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
On direct relevance, Mr Speaker, I appreciate your rule regarding preambles being allowed in questions. We're now halfway into it. Yes, the question is quite specific.
Well, the Manager of Opposition Business, I've heard him, and I have made. Member for Gilmore will cease interjecting. I've made very clear my approach to preambles in the interest of free-flowing debate. I've also made clear in rulings in terms of answers being relevant to the policy area, which the Prime Minister is, and the question had a number of aspects to it. The Prime Minister is entirely relevant to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. So we've asked the opposition to support these tougher sentences to help us stamp out gun smuggling, the illegal traffic in guns that provides the weapons that are used in the vast majority of gun crimes. Figures of well over 90%, in fact, when I say the vast majority. So if the opposition is serious about the fair and appropriate and efficient regulation of guns to keep Australians safe, they would back us. But no, as usual, far from being interested in principle, they're more interested in politics. Now, turning to the specific question, I have made inquiries of my ministers, and I can say to the House that as a result of those inquiries, I am satisfied that the Minister for Justice acted in the full knowledge of the Prime Minister's office at that time.
The member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister.
Member for Moore will resume his seat. Members on my left will cease interjecting. Members on my left will cease interjecting, or I'll need to lower the volume by another means. The member for Jellybrand is warned. The member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment. Will the Minister outline to the House this government's commitment to ensure that employer and employee organisations always act in the best interests of their members, particularly in light of their connection to other registered organisations?
The Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Moore for his question. And he, like me and everyone else on this side of the House, supports honest unions, and we support honest union leaders. And we want to make sure that through the Registered Organisations Commission, they remain an important part of the system. What the Registered Organisations Commission bill will do, Mr Speaker, is remove from the system dishonest union leaders and rogue unions that are causing the kind of trouble that hurts honest union leaders and, of course, through them hurts the workers that they are supposed to represent. And so that's why I can't for the life of me, Mr Speaker, work out why the Leader of the Opposition, the Labor Party, opposes honest unions and honest union leaders. Because you would think, with the Labor Party's links to the union movement, they would want to have honest union leaders and honest unions as part of their organisation. It was Mark Latham, Mr Speaker, who wrote some years ago in 2012, each of the health service unions' troubles can be traced back to the corrosive impact of Labor factional politics, and the reverse argument is also true. And we are seeing, Mr Speaker, that corrosive impact of factional civil war in the ALP happening right now, Mr Speaker. Right now it's on display in Victoria. The Leader of the Opposition has shoehorned his friend Kimberley Kitching into the Senate vacancy created by Senator Conroy. This has been done against the wishes of both his factional allies and factional adversaries alike, Mr Speaker. Even the member for Grayndler has refused to endorse the choice of Kimberley Kitching for the Senate, Mr Speaker. He said, when asked about it this week, he said he'd never heard of this woman. Never heard of her. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know all the candidates. He couldn't possibly comment. Everyone knows, Mr Speaker, not a leaf falls in the Labor Party forest without the member for Grayndler knowing it. He's burying his head in his paper. Oh, no, he's looked up now, Mr Speaker. The truth is, the member for Grayndler knows everything that's going on in the Labor Party across the country. He knows all about Kimberley Kitching, but he wasn't prepared to back her in, Mr Speaker, because he knows that the war in the Victorian Labor Party is out of control. We have Senator Gavin Marshall from the left. Senator Gavin Marshall attacking with a political hatchet his colleagues this week, targeting the member for Scullin, saying he's going to take his pre-selection away. The member for Ballarat attacking her, and amazingly of all things, Mr Speaker, attacking the revered and venerable member for Jaga Jaga. Loved on all sides of the House, but not by Senator Gavin Marshall, Mr Speaker. So we're trying to help the Leader of the Opposition. We're trying to help him with the Registered Organisations Commission bill. We're trying to clean up the unions for him because we know they're inextricable links to the Labor Party, and yet he won't help himself, Mr Speaker.
The member's time has expired. The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Today it's reported that the Deputy Prime Minister supports the New South Wales Deputy Premier taking a proposal to the New South Wales Cabinet to allow the importation of the Adler shotgun. Is the position of the Deputy Prime Minister the position of the government, and is that position consistent with the advice or recommendations of the Australian Federal Police?
Hear, hear. The Prime Minister has the call. The member for Barton.
Our position is saying that we want the states to do the best job.
Yeah, I thank the honourable member for his question, and can I refer the honourable member to the statement issued this morning by the New South Wales Police Minister Troy Grant, who I might say is a former police officer and indeed a decorated one. The minister said, noted that he was supporting the Commonwealth ban on imported lever-action shotguns with a capacity of more than 5 rounds until the gun is reclassified. He said the New South Wales government supports a strengthening of classification of the Adler A110 shotgun from its current A category to a tighter one. our position, the minister said, represents a strengthening of the current A classification of the Adler, but the ultimate decision is a matter for national consensus. Now, the position of the Commonwealth, based on the advice we've received from our federal police and other security advisors, is that the classification for the lever-action shotgun should, indeed, as Mr Grant has noted there, be tightened. Currently, and this has been the case since 1996, lever-action shotguns are classified as A, and the consideration that is being given by the Justice or Police Ministers is that is how it should be increased. And the concern has particularly been for the shotguns with a magazine capacity of more than 5 rounds, and that is the class of shotgun that has been banned from importation since last year. Now, the Commonwealth Minister, the Minister for Justice, is seeking to ensure that the state and territory ministers who do have that it is their legislation that regulates these guns. It's very important to recognise this. The Commonwealth obviously controls importation, but the regulation, the categorisation, the licensing of firearms is a matter for state and territory jurisdictions. So we are encouraging the states to come to a consensus which will see a reclassification with an appropriately tighter classification on those lever-action weapons. And of course, once that consensus is reached and the reclassification is fully implemented, then consistent with the arrangements described on several occasions now, as this ban has gone through now 3 iterations, the ban would be lifted, and so guns, the import arrangements would then be consistent with the reclassification. So that's our commitment, keeping Australians safe, ensuring that we hold the ring, keep those guns out of the country until the appropriate reclassification by the state and territory police ministers is agreed to.
The member for North Sydney.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Will the minister update the House on the steps the government has taken to protect Australians from dangerous non-citizens? Is the minister aware of any alternative approaches?
The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for North Sydney for his question and his passion, like all of us, in keeping our country as safe as possible. And it is the case that this government has cancelled a record number of visas for non-citizens, people who are involved in all sorts of crimes. There's no question about that. And there has been a dramatic increase over the last 12 months, particularly compared to the last 12 months of when Labor was in government. Now, it is indisputable, of course, that there are significant links between the CFMEU and outlaw motorcycle gang members. Now, this, of course, gets the Labor Party excited, and they interject on these occasions. You know why? $10 million comes from the CFMEU into the coffers of the Australian Labor Party over recent years, and the CFMEU seek to defend the bikies because the bikies provide the muscle on the building sites, kicking out hard-working subcontractors who go there to employ other Australians, to provide for their small business, to do the work they've been paid to do. And we have militant unions supported by bikies across the country closing down work sites this very day, as reported by Renee Valaris in the Courier Mail today, which demonstrates, Mr Speaker, the depth of involvement between the CFMEU and the Australian Labor Party and outlaw motorcycle gangs. Now, people might ask why this Leader of the Opposition would not stand up to the CFMEU and say, why do you tolerate the behaviour of your officials? Why do you tolerate the behaviour of this hired muscle on building sites? Because it increases the costs of units. So when young Australians are going this weekend to an open house, to a unit that they may not be able to afford or they've been saving up for, they know that that unit is more expensive because they have seen building costs increase as a result of the involvement of the unions and of the bikies. Now, all of these people who receive money opposite from the CFMEU and from the other unions can bleat all they want, but the facts remain the same. It would be like, and there are good unions in this country, what about the shoppies? I mean, what about the shoppies if the shoppies employed the bikies to go into Woolies, into Coles and into IGA and started upturning grocery aisles and muscling up to the poor shop attendants at the counter at the front of the store. I mean, would you find that acceptable? Would you find that acceptable for the bikies to be roaring in there, showing off their tattoos, bashing customers as they're coming in because they should be going down this aisle and not that aisle? I mean, that's what this Labor Party has been reduced to. That's what this Labor Party's been reduced to. This weak Leader of the Opposition is completely owned and operated by union bosses around the country. He demonstrates every day he'll do anything for union bosses, he'll do nothing for the workers.
The member for Griffith, Leader of the Opposition.
My questions to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that in a previous answer today he stated that the member for Warringah was wrong when he told the 7:30 report that the Prime Minister's office was not informed by Ministers Dutton or Keenan or their staff about the Guns for Votes deal?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I refer the honourable member to my previous answer, which I think was perfectly clear.
The member for Page.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. Will the Minister update the House on how the government is creating jobs and economic growth through trade and investment, and is the Minister aware of any threats to this economic growth?
The Minister for Trade and Investment. Member for Gorton. Member for Gorton is now warned.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Page for his question. I know he's very committed to creating economic growth and driving jobs in his electorate, and like those on this side of the House, very committed to the Coalition's agenda in relation to our free trade agreements that we've put in place, helping to drive economic growth, helping to drive jobs and getting world's preferential access into powerhouse economies. And in fact, I note in the member for Page's own electorate, Macadamia Marketing International has seen tariffs on macadamias eliminated or phased out in China, Japan and Korea under the free trade agreements that were secured by the Coalition. And in fact, since the Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement came into force, their exports to Korea have tripled, meaning more local jobs in that economy. But I note, Mr Speaker, that the member for Page also asked whether there are any threats in relation to Australia's economic growth. And the sad fact is that there are threats to Australia's economic growth, and they come from the Labor Party opposite, but in particular they come from the Leader of the Opposition. Now, I know that the Labor Party has been particularly interested in what former leaders have said. We've seen a lot of focus on that in question time, so I thought it would be educational to look at what some former leaders have in fact said. In fact, the former Leader of the Opposition, Mark Latham, on the Bolt report on the 12th of October, said, and I quote, "It's shameful that Shorten is two-faced, and he really is Billy Two-Face." And he goes on to say, as part of that interview, that he had a very insightful conversation with this man, the Leader of the Opposition, when this man was in fact the AWU National Secretary. And he quotes the Leader of the Opposition when he said, "The members of the union want me to say that. They want to hear the sort of rhetoric against the free trade agreement, but in the parliament there, you should push it through." So we continue to see a form from this Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker, a form where he will say one thing in public and a different thing behind closed doors, a form that's consistent with this Leader of the Opposition being labelled by the former leader as Billy Two-Face. Because the fact is, Mr Speaker, that there's a public bill and there's a private Shorten, and they're two very different matters. The simple fact is that we know that this Leader of the Opposition will do the bidding of the CFMEU, and we know it from Sky News once again, because we saw a letter that was reported on Sky News from the CFMEU on Thursday the 19th of September, where they said, "Will you oppose the reintroduction of the ABCC by the Abbott government, and will you abolish the ABCC immediately upon securing government?" And then we get the response from the Leader of the Opposition: "I commit to opposing the reintroduction of the ABCC." Once again, 11 million reasons for the Labor Party to look the other way.
Expired. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to move the following motion. that the House, 1, notes that today the Prime Minister has openly contradicted the claims of the former Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, on the Guns for Votes scandal. 2, notes that in the first 15 days of the 45th Parliament, A, the government became the first majority government in more than 50 years to lose control of the House of Representatives. B, the Treasurer introduced legislation containing a $107 million black hole. C, the Senate ran out of legislation to debate. D, for the first time since Federation, a government voted to condemn itself. E, the former Prime Minister outflanked the current Prime Minister on his left and on his right. F, the Prime Minister was rolled by the extreme right wing in his party on issue after issue. G, the Prime Minister condoned an Attorney-General who had misled the Parliament. H, the Health Department refused to endorse the Prime Minister's absolute guarantee on the cost of seeing a doctor. And I, the government considered trading guns for votes. And 3, therefore censures the Prime Minister for 15 sitting days of unprecedented chaos from a government in disarray.
Is leave granted? Leave is not granted. The member for Watson.
I move that so much of the standing and sessional orders be suspended as would prevent the Manager of Opposition Business from moving the following motion forthwith. That the House, 1, notes that today the Prime Minister has openly contradicted the claims of the former Prime Minister on the Guns for Votes scandal. 2, notes that in the first 15 days of the 45th Parliament, the government became the first majority government in more than 50 years to lose control of the House of Representatives. B, the Treasurer introduced legislation containing a $107 million black hole. C, the Senate ran out of legislation to debate. D, for the first time in Federation, a government voted to condemn itself. E, the former Prime Minister outflanked the current Prime Minister on his left and on his right. F, the Prime Minister was rolled by his extreme right wing on issue after issue. G, the Prime Minister condoned an Attorney-General who had misled the Parliament. H, the Health Department refused to endorse the Prime Minister's absolute guarantee on the cost of seeing a doctor. And I, the government considered trading guns for votes. And 3, therefore censures the Prime Minister for 15 sitting days of unprecedented chaos from a government in disarray. You've got to hand it to them. They can fit a lot in 15 days.
Will resume his seat. The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, as the motion is based on an entirely false promise, I move that I move that the member be no longer heard.
The Leader of the House has moved that the Manager of Opposition Business be no longer heard. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. Order. The question is that the Manager of Opposition Business be no further heard. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Gray and Dawson tellers for the ayes and the honourable members for Lawler and Morton tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 74, noes 67. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded. At least Tony Abbott stood for something. This bloke stands for nothing.
The member for Grainley will resume his seat. The Leader of the House has the call.
I move that the member be no longer heard.
The Leader of the House has moved that the member for Grainley be no further heard. All those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. I appoint the same tellers as per the previous division. It would be helpful if members were to remain in their seats during this successive division unless they're leaving the chamber, or they did not vote in the previous division, or they're changing their vote, in which case they should report to the tellers. Lock the doors. The question is that the member for Grainley be no further heard. Members must remain in their seats unless they're changing their vote or did not vote in the previous division, in which case they must report to the tellers. Order. The result of the division is ayes 74, no 67. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Leader of the House.
I move that the motion be put.
The Leader of the House has moved the motion be put. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. I appoint the same tellers as per the previous division. It would be helpful if members were to remain in their seats during this successive division, unless they are leaving the chamber or they did not vote in the previous division or they're changing their vote, in which case they must report to the tellers. Lock the doors. The question is that the motion be put. Members must remain in their seats unless they're changing their vote or they did not vote in the previous division, in which case they must report to the tellers. Order. The result of the division is ayes 74, no 67. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. The question now is that the motion moved by the Manager of Opposition Business be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. I appoint the same tellers as per the previous division. And again, it would be helpful if members were to remain in their seats. Well, probably not on this 1 minute division, actually. Wouldn't be that helpful at all, is it?
Never mind. We're going to go back to...
Lock the doors. The question is that the motion moved by the Manager of Opposition Business be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Morton and Lawler tellers for the ayes and the honourable members for Gray and Dawson tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 64, no 76. The question is therefore resolved in the negative. Now, the member for Isaacs can resume his seat. It's the call that alternates, and the last call went to the Manager of Opposition Business. It's very clear. No, the call alternates. Members can make their members can make the Treasurer will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order. I'm going to hear him out, but he's not going to like the answer. I'm telling him now.
Understanding orders and under practice, Mr Speaker, as you say, the call alternates. It alternates for the people who are asking questions. If someone gets up—
The Leader of the House will not interject.
If someone gets up for any reason other than a question, for example, if they seek leave to table a document, if they take a point of order, if they get up for any reason other than asking a question, that doesn't count in the alternating
The Manager
of the call.
Opposition Business, I completely disagree with that, and that's a rare thing. But I'm not trying to be disparaging. It's the call that alternates. I've made that very clear before. We can argue about this, but if we stop arguing about it now, you'll get another question. So I'm going to call the member for Deakin.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister update the House on the government's plan for jobs and growth, and how are we getting on with the job of delivering our election commitments?
The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and thank him too and all my colleagues for their commitment to delivering our national economic plan. Just this week in the House has passed the amendments to secure the reforms to the backpacker tax, passed the reforms to ensure that Labor's gross mismanagement of vocational education will be brought to an end with a new scheme, saving billions of dollars. We've passed the 2 bills that were the triggers for the double dissolution election. The restoration of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, restoring the rule of law to the construction and building sector, and the Registered Organisations Bill, which will ensure that the Cathy Jackson and the Craig Thompsons and the Caesar Mellams, these people who've been ripping off their members for years, these people who've been ripping off some of the lowest paid workers in Australia will have to face the same standards of accountability, transparency as company directors, and be subject to the same penalties when they do the wrong thing. And, Mr Speaker, we have passed the legislation to deliver on our election commitment to have a plebiscite on the question of same-sex marriage, and we've passed it in plenty of time for the Senate to pass it to enable the vote to be held on the 11th of February. And, Mr Speaker, in previous sitting weeks, we have defended the 60,000 volunteers of the Country Fire Authority of Victoria, whose dignity, whose independence, whose morale was being undermined, overtaken by that militant union, the UFU, which has apparently the Victorian Labor government completely in thrall. We passed the legislation through both houses to ensure that that takeover can't be delivered by the Labor government. And, Mr Speaker, we have delivered, as we promised, tax cuts to middle-income Australians.
Member for Wakefield will cease interjecting.
Australians on middle incomes will not be going into the second highest tax bracket, thanks to our national economic plan. And of course, a key part of our plan has been the delivery of open markets, free trade, that opportunity of jobs and growth for Australian exporters. And so we've seen the signing of the new and considerably expanded Singapore-Australia Free Trade Agreement, and as part of that, Mr Speaker, providing jobs and growth in North Queensland, $2.25 billion of investment by Singapore in Australian defence facilities at Townsville and Shoalwater Bay. So right across the board, the Omnibus Savings Bill, $11 billion of saving. We're governing, we're delivering, we're getting on with the job. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat.